It gives me great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, the man who served this constituency for 2 terms as the Member of Parliament for St. Michael West. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Reverend Joseph Atherley.
Thank you, Ian, and good night to those at the head table, and good night to all of us. I want to thank the planners of the Barbados Labour Party for giving me the opportunity to share here tonight in this meeting. It is an important part of this series of meetings of people's assemblies. I share with Trevor the view that our social partnership needs to be strengthened and that meaningful ways must be found to do so. And I think one such way of seeking to improve that mechanism would be to ensure that there's a voice that speaks in the interests of the people, as the people. Not the voice of the state, not the voice of the business sector, not the voice of organized labor, but the voice of the people as the people. I also share the view that if our social partnership is to be meaningful and to have a sustained, significant role in the development of our economy and society, we've got to be big enough and mature enough to include the view and the presence of the opposition. I don't share Trevor's view that the social partnership as a mechanism has been a means of diluting the vibrancy or robustness of the voice of labor. I think the problem is not in the way the social partnership is structured in that regard. I think it has to do with the personalities that have been representing the voice of labor in the social partnership. But perhaps I will get the opportunity to speak a little later on this business of the social partnership a little bit more. Our nation, I said before, and I would repeat because I strongly believe it, is a nation fast becoming bereft of spirit. The spirit of our nation is dying. The light of hope is fast being extinguished in the eyes of our young people. When you look into their eyes, you see something that is in a very menacing way replacing that light of hope. And it portends something, in my view, sinister for this country. I, not too long ago, sat in the barber shop and I listened to 3 young men speaking about our country. And not one of them was expressing a word of pride with respect to Barbados. Everything they said suggested that hope had fled and despair had come to take its place. And for them, Barbados was no longer the place to live because it afforded them no opportunity which they could see in the immediate or distant future. So life for them must be lived elsewhere. I think that speaks very loudly and in clear terms of a country that is losing its future, because it is losing the commitment and sense of pride that ought to exist in the bosom of its young people. After all, who will take this nation to the next level, if not our young people? The government of the day has made much of this mantra that the Barbados Labour Party, when in office, emphasized too much the management of the economy. Now, there's an irony in that. Because with one side of the mouth, it is said that the Barbados Labour Party as a government and administration emphasized too much management of the economy, and the other side of its mouth, the Barbados Labour Party and government is responsible for the ruin of the economy. So we ruined the economy by paying too much attention to the economy. They said that they were more so engaged in the business of building a society. Tonight, you and I and they know we have come to the sorry place that the economy is in shambles by their admission, and the society is threatened with ruin. Our society tonight is imperiled because of the government of the day. Our society tonight is fast becoming impoverished. Middle class, working class, the not working class, because of the government of the day. And I'd like to cause us to reflect tonight on the peril that faces our beloved society. A country or a society is imperiled when its institutions, its key institutions, fail. The government as an institution has failed. Organized labor, the trade union movement as an institution right before our eyes right now is failing. The church in this regard has failed. And we can go on to detail the significant institutions that help a society to thrive and to develop and to get better and to realize its fullest potential. And all of these institutions are beset with the specter of failure. A government fails when it is unable to meet its current expenditure in a chronic manner. What we have with this government is 6 years of chronic failure with respect to managing current expenditure in Barbados. Never before in the history of this country. Mia Motley put it right when she said Barbadians are not broke. It is our government which is broke. By their own admission, they can't pay their bills. It means they cannot pay our bills. That only not has implications for the economy, it has implications for the society. So a society will fail when its government is unable, as this one is, to meet its current expenditure month to month. A society is failing when its government, especially in a political developmental context such as ours here in Barbados, is unable to mount any meaningful capital program. These guys came in with great flurry and fanfare. The whole of Barbados went down to Kensington and heard grand pronouncements of all kinds of plans, some to start immediately, some to be realized over time, went into office the next day and started to dismantle the capital program of the previous administration, not recognizing that if you do that, you are going to interfere with the flow of money in the economy, and that it has implications for employment or unemployment. Tonight, no meaningful capital program is mounted by this government. And they have borrowed more in that 6 years than we borrowed in the entire 14 years. And that which we borrowed was put to productive purpose and put to producing the kind of capital program that built Barbados infrastructurally and employed our people. A government is failing, and the society will fail when that government cannot speak with certainty about investment. We are not great producers. We are not resourced to that extent as that we could be the kind of producers that we aspire to be perhaps at this stage. And so we rely on investment. This government has not been able in 6 years to speak to us with any certainty and sometimes honesty with reference to investment. That is why we dug a hole at Pickering, and nothing has come forth since. That is why we have had multiple pronouncements as to the resumption of the project at Four Seasons, and nothing has happened. Because they cannot speak with certainty. A society is failing when its government is failing with respect to creating confidence in the economy so that such people might want to invest. By their own admission, nobody has confidence in the Barbadian economy, not even them. A society is failing when its government is unable, in a context such as ours, to deliver on basic social services. Now, we're not talking about sophisticated aspects of any social service infrastructure. We're not talking about the most up-to-date, state-of-the-art pieces of equipment for the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. We are not talking about that because there will always be constraints with respect to those things. But we are talking about basic things like toilet paper and soap and bandages. Basic social services, such that those who are medically knowledgeable by practice are afraid that Barbadian lives will be lost in that institution because the government of the day, in building our society, has neglected to remember that the economy must be strong enough to provide for at least the basic social service amenities in Barbados. And the society will fail. And the government will fail when it is unable to create the kind of environment in which employment numbers will rise. Since these guys come to office, the unemployment figures have been rising. They're building a society of unemployed people, because unemployment has been rising. The state, in our context, because of the limited capacity of the indigenous private sector, and especially in these days because of the competition for foreign direct investment, the state, in a context such as ours, must be able to absorb numbers in its employ. I am not quickly going to buy into the view that the public service at 27,000 bodies in Barbados or whatever is too large. You can only accept that statement if it is applied to a specific context. It is too large now because the economy has been shrinking. It is too large now because they have not been looking to provide proper jobs for people. It is too large now because in the face of a shrinking government revenue position, they chose, as a lead-up to an election, to beat me in St. Michael West, to employ all kinds of people whom now they have fired. He telling me to stop, and I no start. And they don't let me talk often. And I like to play as a team player and obey the rules. But when you come down, say Michael West, things different. And I will guarantee you all, I will quit in sufficient time for Harold to get to speak. And I will quit in sufficient time for David to get to speak. I am not too sure about facilitating anybody else. Now, don't go and say I said that. Now, where were we? Come on, where were we? At church, somebody was shouting. Somebody was shouting, tell me where we were. This government has no credibility. Societal failure is part of the outflow when a government has no credibility. They told us they had something called a medium-term fiscal strategy, and they repeatedly said it is on track, we are on target, and then they abandoned it as a failure. They said there's no need to worry about the foreign reserves. Now we got to go to Cayman and borrow a loan from some Credit Suisse with draconian rates attached to it just to prop up the foreign reserves and to come and tell Barbadians, we all right, we are at 14 weeks. All of a sudden, foreign exchange flying out somehow, and they don't understand, and we're not supposed to have had a problem with that. This government has no credibility. But beyond credibility, this government, hear me now, and I make no apology for saying this government, though just elected less than 1 year ago, has no moral authority to govern this country. They may have constitutional authority. They may have constitutional authority. They won an election in Hear me. They won an election in 15 of the constituencies that now they represent in Parliament. Come and talk to me quietly about the 16th. I'll give you the story. So constitutionally, they're all right, Harold, but they have no moral authority. You know why they have no moral authority? Because the crux of their political campaign in the last general election was this: elect us and save your jobs. Elect them, 10,000 people are going to get sent home. Elect us because if you elect them, they're going to privatize everywhere and people are going to lose their jobs at Transport Board, at NHC, all across the place. What are they saying now? Less than 1 year after the election. And they've been saying it for months. So they have no moral authority. The church, I got to finish quickly. The church as an institution must face a charge. I don't like to talk in public in negative fashion about the church. And I don't come easily to this because people have a sufficiently negative view of the church already. And I want you to make heaven. So I don't want to interfere with any of that. But listen, the church in Barbados, in the face of the great betrayal by the Democratic Labour Party as a party in the last election, has kept silent. In the face of all that is happening, the church has either been passive and inactive, which it ought not to be, or it has been complicit with the government in betraying the aspirations, ambitions of Barbadian people. And you know, they will tell you, as a church person, you should not be involved in politics. There are in the leadership of the church multiple persons who are bigger politicians than I am. And they don't ever get on a political platform. And they're very partisan in their view and exert that partisan influence over their congregations. In the face of the great betrayal by this party, not a word said. And the church has a social justice pursuit mandate. The church has a social justice calling. This is how Jesus saw himself. We can't preach tonight. Let's get from there. Prime Minister Erskine Sandiford said, I stop it now, Ian. You can take the time off my next speech. Prime Minister Erskine Sandiford said, when they can like it, and we never forgave him. Lammy Craig said, let him starve. And, or he said to have said that, and we never let him forget that. How is it, pray tell me, that in 2013, anybody can get up and say that the state needs to crack some heads or shoot some people in this country, and nobody does anything about that? And no apology has been forthcoming. And the church has sat silent in the face of that. And the official opposition let them get away with that. Not even an apology. Where are my people? No man, no matter where he sits, if he has said that, whoever it was that said it, if he had said it in Mia Motley's cabinet, he would be fired. I am sure about that. If he had said it in Arthur's cabinet, he would have been fired. And not only fired, but fired summarily and in the worst way. He would get the message. And all others would get the message. And would fall in line. But we are about cracking heads and shooting people in our beloved Barbados in 2014. And the church ain't get up and say a word. You know, in the 1970s, 73, 74, a man called Harold Critchlow kicked up a storm in Bridgetown because Errol Barra attempted to do one or two things which he didn't like and which we didn't like. And he kicked up a storm. It's celebrated in song. Now people can talk about shooting you and cracking your head, and nobody says or does anything. And not even an apology. And the church, nary a word. Where's the voice of the church? Ian, I finish it now. I only see two other speakers, so I presume we have time. Society will fail when organized labor unions resile from their responsibility. Part of the reasons why trade unions came about in the first place, and it's perhaps not, it wasn't seen in terms of being a positive reason, but it has served a useful purpose. The trade unions as organizations were intended to structure and harness the protest energy of labor. In other words, when people felt that they were being unjustly treated and they wanted to rise up and do something about it, if you had a trade union movement through which that protest energy could be channeled, it kept a certain bit of social tranquility or societal calm. So the unions have that role to play. Hear me now. You can call me alarmist if you want. But unless the present posture of organized labor in this country changes and workers begin confidently again to believe that those unions are working on their behalf, we will have an explosion in this country. If organized labor leadership cannot control the protest energy, we will have an explosion in this country. And maybe the government knows that and fears that, because I'm hearing rumors recently of certain things coming through the port in abundance. but I don't gossip. And unions cannot result from, they have allowed the dismantling virtually of the social partnership by being soft in their position, by being lax in their posture, almost appearing complicit with the government for whatever ends. They have been complicit with the government in a wage freeze for Barbadians over the past 5 years. They have been complicit with the government, in my view, in the face of the devaluation of the purchasing power, the capacity of the Barbadian worker, the consumer in this country. We have had a virtual wage freeze and a virtual purchasing money devaluation in Barbados without having a formal external, what they call it, devaluation. That is what these unions have allowed. They have sat quietly while construction privilege in this Barbados has been consolidated in the hands of one or two major companies. Not realizing that when that happens, other companies must send home people. It's work to the detriment of workers. I finish because they can talk bad about me tomorrow. But hear me. The unions need to come up to the plate. The church needs to rise up, step up to the plate. The government, it is beyond their capacity to come to the plate. The Barbados Labour Party must relieve them of the burden of government responsibility in this country. The psyche of the country needs to be healed. The psyche of this country needs healing. But if the Barbados Labour Party is to provide that healing, the Barbados Labour Party must heal itself. And I'm not going to go down that road tonight with specifics because I have done that before. Before we went out of government, I was talking those things. Those who know you will tell me. But I won't talk them tonight because we are at a certain point in things and a certain climate obtains. But we need to heal ourselves. And Harold, I was going to talk about the media, but I will not go there because the time has gone. But we got a media that is being marginalized and silenced. CBC is now the institutionalized voice of the government and nobody does anything about it. The other media houses are being made subject to infiltration and intimidation before the courts and with law enforcement, and nobody's saying anything about it. We will wake up one of these days and find that this seeming innocent but incompetent government has the competence to put a stranglehold around the necks of Barbadians, and our freedoms will be lost. We need to rise up. We need to rise up. I make an appeal to my parliamentary and party colleagues to lead the charge. Lead the charge. Forget me remotely, forget Oinafa, don't be distracted. Lead the charge. Lead the charge. And if you in Parliament can't lead the charge, I will get together those of us outside of the Parliament and we will lead the charge.
Thank you very much, Reverend